Best practices for when you are implementing policies for your company for the first time. I like to think of it, there's two basic methodologies. There's the FOMO methodology and the build as you go methodology. FOMO basically says, fear of missing out. Like, let's just get the biggest template that has everything we could ever possibly need as a company and use that as our policy. That way, down the line, we'll have everything covered. We can just point to our policy and say, this is our policy. It'll cover us from a compliance standpoint. It'll cover us from a legal standpoint. Be good to go. Or there's a build as you go methodology, which is more just start with what you need and add on to that later. You can probably tell which one I prefer. So quick pros and cons here. The FOMO methodology is nice to have so that you have everything you can need on a compliance. If you run into a questionnaire from a large enterprise company, they have a bunch of weird requirements. You got it all in your big policies. They probably cover everything. You got to go find it. The cons of that are finding things is very difficult and burdensome. And ultimately, your policies start to really mean nothing in practice because they're so hard to update or find what you're looking for, or just to read, that people stop reading them and people stop using them as drivers of culture and drivers of process. So I would say, while it does have the drawback, use the build as you go policy. And some best practices around that are, first, to remember that the policy is not meant to be a passive descriptor of your business. It is meant to define your culture and your process. So don't create a policy because you have to for compliance and assign it to your compliance manager to go get done. Rather, sit down with your leadership team and ask, what do we want to see happen in these core areas? And how do we get there? And then out of that, work with your compliance manager or whoever to define policies. Number two, best practice, communicate the policy to where it needs to go. Ensure that the policies are accessible to employees. Communicate when the policy gets built or is updated, send out an email, Slack, whatever, and ensure there's consistency between policy and the training that employees undergo. A lot of that content can be reused and should be reused for consistency so that employees are seeing the same thing. Leadership demands we do X, Y, Z, and here's the way that we're supposed to do X, Y, Z. Third best practice, use templates. And use templates very purposefully to define and implement your policies. Templates should be a structural starting point. They should give you content ideas, and they should act as a double check to really increase the quality of your policy. They should not be your default starting point or the main thing that just needs this light review and then we can sign off on it. They should be used as a skeleton or a double check for content. And finally, in your policies, include a table that documents who's the policy owner, when it was drafted, and the latest version or any updates that were made. And then set it on an annual cadence for review. Set up a compliance calendar or a JIRA ticket, assign that to the owner, make sure they know they're responsible for actually reviewing this each year, what's entailed in the review, and how to sign off on that when it's done. That's going to make it easy to track internally. That's going to make compliance super easy down the road.